All right, so good to see all of you again. It's good to have the monks around. That was a nice visit. And just a reminder, if anyone took the Vajrasattva empowerment and you wanted the sadhana, we can email you the practice. And so just send me an email and I'll make sure to get that to you. I think I even have it to download, but just let me know. And if you did the Vajravadaran, I have the image of Vajravadaran and the mantra for that. So I can get you a little image card with the mantra. So just let me know. Okay. So we left off in our text right in the middle of the topic of emptiness, the wisdom of emptiness. Light topic. And we approached it, I really wanted to read a bit from the text and we just talk about it. There's some very pithy, rich pieces in here that some of the, even my teacher has been quoted. So I think it's nice to come from that perspective. And we'll see how we can just tie it into our daily life. With teachings, it's the idea of talking about teachings or hearing about teachings, it's beneficial. But ultimately, if they don't really register in how I apply them in my life, how it makes sense to me, it's really hard to make progress. It's one thing to hear about teachings, or this makes sense, or I get that. But when we walk out that door, if it doesn't really apply in a way I relate to myself and others, it's really going to be challenging to make progress. And so, hopefully as we go through this, especially on this incredibly rich topic of the nature of reality itself, how does that work in my life? How can I use this knowledge in a way that is going to eliminate some suffering in my life and help me engage in the world in a more accurate way that liberates me and is truly beneficial to others? And for me, that's meaningful. So the last talk covered, just the sort of views on emptiness, how things, essentially are parts. Where does a car begin and where does it end? At what point does something become a car? When does it stop being a car? That the car is a label. There's no self-existent car, and that everything that we label is made up of parts, of causes, of conditions. That nothing exists independently, right? Nothing exists inherently of its own. Everything is dependent upon causes, conditions, materials, things. So one of my easy analogies that I like a lot is food. You guys may have noticed that I use food a bit, but here it's food, right? A banana. I take a bite of a banana. At what point does it stop being a banana? And what point does it start becoming me? At what point? Where does that come? Where does that go? And banana, right? It's again a label, and then it's made up of the peel, and then the fruit, and it came from the from the plant, which came from the soil, which came from the water. So as you start looking at anything, you start noticing that everything is interdependent, and nothing can exist independently from its own side. And so when we're talking about emptiness, what we're really talking about is that things are empty of these qualities we project into them as though they are intrinsically them. Whether it's a banana, whether it's a cup or a book or John, these are labels, they're mental constructs which don't exist independently anywhere. As a matter of fact, mental constructs exist in my mind, right? There's no cup there, right? There is no cup there. The cup's in my mind, the label cup. But there is a valid object of designation that I call a cup, right? So as we kind of, play with this, it's like, wow, cup is a mental idea there's something here, there's phenomena here. And it's made up of, ceramics and these conditions that all came together. And right now I'm using it with liquid, which has a handle, and we call it actually, is it a cup or is it a mug? It's a mug, maybe. And so, what's the point of understanding that there's a label and that things are interdependent? Well, that's the important thing. It's one thing to understand that there's phenomena, and there's labels, and there's what we call two truths. So conventional and ultimate truth. So conventionally, we have a cup, we have John, we have you, we have chairs. I love the word in Tibetan for chair. It's called kupkya, which basically means butt lift. And it's very practical, right? Because they didn't really have chairs. They mostly sit around. But we got chairs, so it's a butt lift. And, it does something. But, so we have this conventional world we live in, and these labels are helpful. We could not exist without a conventional reality. I'm John. You wouldn't know me. I need a driver's license and a car to drive. And that's a conventional reality. But what happens is we attribute too many qualities as though they're intrinsically existent. That creates a lot of problems. And it's just not the way things are. So Buddhism ultimately is about seeing things accurately. Living in the, seeing and understanding the nature of phenomena and reality. And the basic working hypothesis is if I could see clearly, there would be nothing to arise, any mental afflictions of anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration. All those are dependent upon misperception. And out of that misperception, I create a lot of karma, which keeps me caught up in habits and tendencies that perpetuate suffering. And we can break it by just learning to see clearly. So that's kind of, when we look at it, this is really the path of liberation, is to see clearly, to be free of all that, to be free of that grasping of self that creates all my suffering. And so let's see what they have to say about that. It's an important topic. So we kind of got this point where we just kind of looked at how there's no one thing that exists inherently. Nothing. And often we'll point at that one thing as being very important. And we use the analogy of a basketball game, right? The game-winning shot. Well, that would be meaningless without all the other shots and all the other points, right? But the game-winning shot is what everybody says. He won the game. Well, it would have been meaningless without the other 90 points. Likewise, everything in our life is like that. We'll look at a particular event in our life and how that was pivotal, but it was dependent upon all the other events in our lives that put us there, and the causes and conditions and everything that put that there, and then that point. But we tend to look at one point and we freeze it, and we say that's what it is, or this is important and this is why that's important. And if we start to understand that everything is interdependent, and everything that's happening is a result of causes and conditions, and that in ourselves, I have a lot of habits and tendencies that I can't stop, even though I would like to, and even though I know it's not healthy. I do it anyway, right? I mean, we all have experienced that, right? A simple one, don't worry about that. And your mind says, oh no, we're going to worry about that. Matter of fact, have you thought about this? And then you can say, no, I'm not going to worry about that. And then the mind says this. And, or certain habits that we want to try to change. Well, notice there's very strong tendencies and impulses. And we're conditioned. And there's food that we're more conditioned that we like, and we nurture that. And the way I see the world based on the way I was raised versus somebody else who's raised differently, and they have their tendencies. And what we start to find is that we get kind of trapped, We get kind of trapped. I would like to have a mind that's clear and open, and I'd like to see everybody and their value in everybody. And Then all of a sudden I get mad at so-and-so and they're a jerk and they did this. I go, well, how'd that happen? I know that he's not really a jerk, and I know that he's doing the best he can, and yet I'm angry. And then the mind will say, well, that shouldn't have happened. And that's the most fascinating delusion of all, right? It's so quite literally insane. But we'll do it all the time. That shouldn't have happened. And I'm angry because it did. And there's a reason things happen. So to think that something shouldn't have happened, when you can point out that there's causes and conditions that gave rise to it, more accurately is I didn't want it to happen, which is, maybe a little more accurate insight. But our mind does these games, and then we get caught up in how it shouldn't have been happening. We'll spend 20 minutes talking about how it shouldn't have happened, and it can destroy happiness. And it's all in my mind. We were just on vacation, and we're at a beautiful beach on an island that people aspire to go to. It's an amazing place, right? And there's a family there, a family with kids, and grandparents come, and then a lady came, and someone had tried to get her a parking spot. And, it's not easy to get parking at this beach, and you got to park a ways. And needless to say, that turned into an altercation, which turned into some big problems, which by the time she made it to the beach to be with the grandkids, there was 20 minutes of anger and frustration. Let me explain all this to you and all that, while you are at one of the most pristine locations that people go on the earth to be with your grandkids, in paradise, quite literally, very upset and angry over, whose parking spot, right? And how much time and energy do I allow that to absorb out of my life? This is what our mind does, and it doesn't do it because she chose to get angry. There's habits and tendencies and a perception of that's me, and I'm here to be with my kids, and I had a plan, and this person did something, and I don't think that. And I bet you the other person probably had a very different view of the situation. Again, it's understanding that I have habits and tendencies and a view of things, and it's perpetual. It's almost against my better judgment at times. And so do you. and that's where we're getting to at this point in the book, is we start to understand that there's causes and conditions for things, and that things, these qualities that we attribute, jerk, idiot, wrong, right, all that, are not intrinsic in the things themselves. It's always a subjective experience based upon my imprints. So we got that.
It's not part of our Buddha nature to be that way.
Yeah, so when we reflect upon our Buddha nature, our natural state, without all the conceptual mind, you're not going to find that. So that's sort of, you're getting at the sort of key working hypothesis that says, in order for me to have those mental afflictions, I need to be caught up in misperception. It's not my natural state. It's unnatural. It's actually quite unnatural. But it sure feels natural, doesn't it? Okay. I'm just trying to review to get us right into it. Yeah, so we just wanted to make sure that we covered as we go into this, and it's one of the big problems when we talk about emptiness, is that people fall into one of two camps, right? Nothing exists, and that's not accurate. Things exist. There's something here. There is phenomena. It just doesn't exist independently. It's dependent upon. It's interdependent, and the qualities and labels that we attribute to it, they don't have an ultimate reality. But things exist. They just don't exist the way I see them, the way they appear to me. And then the other view is that everything exists exactly the way I see it, right? I know that Jimmy's a jerk. Absolutely. There's not an ounce of good quality or compassion in that guy. Which, obviously is not true. But it sure feels like it sometimes. So that just as I experienced it, it's all true and real. There's an objective, measurable world out there that doesn't change. You see it the same way I see it. So that's one view. Well, that's not true, right? Because everybody in here is going to experience even what I'm sharing quite differently and pick up different things. And you all will like different things and have different tendencies. And some of you have different favorite desserts than I do, which I find odd. So, but we'll think this is the best dessert. And we think you should think that. It's funny. So, understanding that things do exist, but they don't exist independently, and they don't exist in the way that I perceive them inherently. That I'm always going to experience everything through a subjective experience. It's interdependent. Right? So having said that, an intellectual understanding of the true meaning of emptiness is only the beginning. However, for to incorporate and fully realize the profundity of this view of reality is at least a lifetime's work. The implications of the philosophy of emptiness are truly enormous and can utterly transform how we view ourselves and those around us. We first become aware of the myriad influences that affect our actions and how we are the direct product of these influences. And that's something that's important. It's important to notice how we get trapped. Our habits, our tendencies, our hooks, our triggers. And notice how we'll get caught up doing things that we don't feel good about. We'll get caught up saying things I regret. We'll get caught up with a mind that's doing things I don't want it to do. And if I can start to realize that it happens to me, well, then I might realize it happens to you too. That's the next sentence here. But we have to notice it. We have to actually notice it. And that's the hard part, because with the distracted mind and just taking things as I feel, if I get angry or upset and thinking, well, that's the cause of my anger. That person, that thing. Well, that's not accurate, is it? Right? Anger's a mental state. It's not out there, it's in my mind. And it's not the event itself, it's how I view and judge and evaluate the event. And so the conditions that trigger anger, but the real causes for anger are in my mind. They're not out there. So we've covered that. But we forget it quite easily. I would be happy if, yeah. So first we become these influences, and then we extend this insight to other people. We begin to develop a greater understanding and tolerance of their situations as we learn that they, too, are under the sway of a vast network of forces that we can barely begin to comprehend. The Dalai Lama has said, when we consider that everything we experience results from a complex interplay of causes and conditions, we find that there is no single thing to desire or resent, and it is more difficult for the afflictions of attachment and anger to arise. So here he's like, wow, if I start to understand this, that everything that's happening is interdependent, and that whatever event happened, well, there's a lot of causes that led to that event, and that other people, even people that we may not like, who are very angry and very mean, well, if we look into their childhood and saw that they're beat and tied up when they're a child, or sodomized by an uncle, or things like that, then I have a very different view of this person I used to hate. I used to work in counseling and treatment with adolescents, and when you did the psychosocial evaluations, you would see the pain and the suffering that they bring into this world. And you start to know, well, it's not that thing. It's, this lifetime of suffering they've had. And then what gave rise to that suffering, was these sort of conditions of that community, of that, what we tolerate, and what do we project on a TV or on commercials, and, what do we propagate ourselves, and what are the community, and what are the values that go on. And then that leads to different things and different outcomes. And then somebody does something, but they're a jerk. Well, they're not just a jerk. They're the result of a complex web of conditioning that has taken place. It's taken place since we were little kids. I was at a conference in Oakland where they have actual studies that show by the time kindergarten in these low-income areas, little indicators about the effects of whether that kid's going to be in jail when they're 20. I mean, it's amazing by the time they're in kindergarten. One of the most prominent in the studies and just the research, and I have to look it up, but one of the most determinant factors whether an African American male would go to prison was a high school degree or not. If he got a high school degree, there's like a 75 or 80% chance that they wouldn't. Or if he didn't get a high school degree, 75 to 80% chance they will not go to prison with just a high school degree. One thing. In California, it's 90%, just the state of California. But it's not just the high school degree, is it? I taught high school. It's what are all the things that prevent you from getting a high school degree. It's the environment you're raised in, it's the atmosphere and the way you relate to it at school and how you're accepted, or whether you see it as valuable or meaningful, or whether it's a place you can see yourself as successful. And this all starts taking place at kindergarten. And how do I perceive in my class, and how am I engaged in school, and how does that come out, And so when we start to understand, there's a very complex web of things, of people and events, and we'll look at people, and go, well, why don't they just do it the way I did it? I worked for my job, and I got my stuff. And we don't see what it was like to, be laughed at when they tried to read, or, how difficult it was just to go to school. You have to walk through a neighborhood where you might get beat up every day, We don't take all those things into consideration. We think, yeah, they could just do it like I did. And I've never lived in their shoes, right? So if we can start to just understand that how people act and the events that happen in this world are really part of a complex web, we start understanding that what we do in the web makes a difference, right? When I treat you with some kindness and some compassion, it makes a difference. And likewise, when I treat someone as less than and scorn them, it makes a difference. And what are the values that I promote? Just go have fun. What is it? Commercials. Great propaganda on commercials. I don't have a TV, but you get them on computers now. You have to watch the first 5 seconds or whatever, right? To watch the news thing or whatever. So they get you on a commercial. It's amazing what they can sell you on a commercial and the psychology of things that are going on. So if we can, this is just the way things are. The way things are is things happen because of the conditions and the causes. And so we don't start to think it shouldn't be like this, but we could ask the question, how can it be different? Can I change it? Or what's the healthiest way to respond given that this is what's happening? And to start seeing things more accurately and stop, our problem is we don't see the whole picture, we see the event, right? And that's the problem. That guy's my problem. My boss is my problem. The weather's my problem. The flight being delayed is my problem. This is it's just on and on, right? Somebody taking my parking spot's a problem. And we don't recognize that that's just a singular event in a vast web of things that are happening constantly. And the thing that really gives rise to the suffering is I want things to be a particular way. John, the most important person in the room, right? I'm clinging to. And why shouldn't it be that way? I had a plan, right? My plane should have been on time. This should have happened. And it's not. But the anger and the resentment and the frustration comes from the perception of it, not the event itself. And we're talking about mental and emotional suffering. We're not talking about physical pain. That's always key to point out, right? You can think a lot of happy thoughts, but pain, physical pain, still happens. So, so what it's asking us to remember is to see things clearly, that people do things based on their conditioning. Events happen because of causes and conditions. And it's not we shouldn't get mad at the event. We should look at the causes and conditions. So there's people here that are gardeners, right? People that grow stuff, right? Lettuce comes up, or lettuce doesn't grow. We don't get mad at the lettuce, right? Man, that stupid lettuce, it should have, it didn't come out the way I wanted. We look at, well, what were the conditions, right? Is the soil right? Did it get enough water? You start doing that. But with human beings, it's different, right? We don't look at the conditions. It's a bad piece of lettuce there. Right? But that's the deal, right? People are a product of this whole environment. Likewise, the events, car accidents, tragedies, flights not on time, all those things, there's all reasons for it. When you trace it down, there's always a reason. That's why it's kind of insane to think it shouldn't happen. If you find something that doesn't happen for a reason, let me know. Because that would be truly phenomenal. But there's a cause for things, and there's a result for things. So, if we get that, and His Holiness is saying, if I start to understand that, you're going to start to recognize that there's no one thing to really treasure. And there's no one thing to really resent. There's that, and that thing doesn't exist. It's a result of a myriad of things. And if you change a condition about anything, everything changes. We were flying home. Was it about a 5.5 hour flight? 5.5 hours. And this lady sitting next to Laura, she gets all settled in, gets her suitcase, and settles down. She's all comfortable, and then get ready to take off. Yeah, we actually take off. Everything's fine. Everything's good. And then as we get in the air, she goes to put her seat back. And the guy behind her is 6'5". Her seat won't recline. And his knees are right there. And, I'd heard earlier that he was, his wife maybe, said, we should have got a bigger seat for you. And he goes, no, I'll be okay, I'll make it. Like he's bucking up, he's 6'5", he's crimped in there. But boy, when her seat wouldn't recline, whew, an adventure ensued. Oh my God, are you kidding me? I can't sit back. And this guy, you should have got more leg room, and this is wrong. And I have a meeting at 9 o'clock, and I need just all this stuff. And a minute ago she was fine. Now there's a lot of suffering, and then pushing the button and calling for the attendants, but the attendants can't come because it's still at the seatbelt stage, so they can't. Well, why aren't they going? So Laura patiently says, well, I don't think they can come yet, and this is angst, and she's upset at this guy, and this guy's suffering. He's trying to be polite, but if you look at it in a lot of different ways, she's got a valid point, right? That she would like to have a seat that reclines. And she's got a 5.5 hour flight, and that can be pretty uncomfortable. But, all of a sudden he's the problem, and it's his fault, and how unfair it is, and he should have bought another ticket because I can't recline. You can just see a whole mental thing going on here. And nobody's right or wrong in it. And eventually, when they came off, they came back and they were able to get her another seat. And as soon as her needs were met, she had a lot of compassion for the guy behind her. God, it must be difficult being tall. What did she say? My son's tall, and I know it's difficult. And everything changed, right? And everything changed mentally. But how many times in our life do we get in these moments, right? And the moment, it's so big, and it's so unfair. And, you know, and it's horrible, and I need sleep, and I have an appointment at 9, and this and that. And if we look back in our lives, we can't even count how many moments of frustration, anxiety, fear, feelings of unfairness. And then it was Tuesday, right? And then it went away. Her thing went away. But there'll be another thing, right? And it's not that she's wrong or right. It's just the way we are, right? As humans, there's conditioning. Now, if you were getting on that plane and you're thinking, my God, what a gift, I can get on a plane that I can actually get from an island paradise to come home, to have a job, and I have a job, and there's a seat, and they're going to bring me coffee, and, you know, that's a whole different thing. I wouldn't mind sitting up straight, and it's actually pretty good posture. And, you know, maybe a doctor told you need to sit up straight, then it'd be fine, right? It'd be a whole different thing. And the only thing that would have changed was my mind, right? And so that's where this nature of emptiness, what His Holiness is really wanting us to look at, is to recognize that it's not the events, right? And the events are always part of a complex web of things. And if I can see the bigger picture, I can recognize that there's no one event, no one thing that's actually the source. It's really the way I'm looking at it. And if I change that one thing, right, my attitude, my perspective, it's amazing how everything else can change, right? How grateful it is that, you know, I can get on a plane and I just came from this island paradise that, you know, I mean, there's a million things that are going pretty good. And worst case scenario that you'd have to sit upright in an airplane. Yeah, right? I mean, there's horrific things happening, right? Horrific things happening with people suffering. And there's real suffering, you know, there's real suffering. So, we don't want to be that person. And yet we can be that person, can't we? We can get pretty worked up over something, how somebody said something to us or treated us a certain way, or they took something that was unfair or whatever. And it can go. A friend of mine, I like his quote, he says, I never had a bad day in my life. I've had a bad 5 minutes, and I've made it last for days. Right? But we can do that. And so as we enter in this emptiness, this is something I think is helpful. I think it's helpful that if I recognize that these events are very ephemeral, that they come and they go, and they're going to have as much energy as I give them. It's not the event. There's a much bigger interplay and samsara. And if I think that I'm going to find some lasting happiness in a conditioned existence, I'm fundamentally delusional. Just fundamentally. I will find respites without, you know, glaring suffering. But, you know, that's the nature of existence. But I forget that. And I really think I'd be happy if I had another seat. Fundamentally flawed thinking, misperception. So His Holiness is just one. Now, if you recognize that, then he's saying in this final sentence here, well, it's going to be a lot more difficult for attachment and, you know, anger to arise. It's going to be more difficult, you know. But it's an interesting impulse because we could be. I just had so much. It was interesting to be in paradise and watch people suffer. You know, I mean, literally, this island is just one of the most, you know, it's just incredible. And it's incredible in more than one way. It's incredible in a way that there's very little that actually his adverse in any way in that island. But there's a lot of suffering there, right? You know, wow, water is a little murky. You know, there's better snorkeling at that other beach. But I didn't go to that other beach. I at this beach, you know. And then so-and-so went there. Oh, no, I didn't get to see that. I mean, it's amazing. I talked to this one lady. She said, the traffic here's terrible. You know, we go to this other island now because this traffic's bad. But she's been going there for 20 years when there wasn't traffic. So the comparison was she knew what it was like without traffic. People will come and they think, well, it's a little bit of traffic, but it's paradise, right? And you just see the suffering. It doesn't matter where we are. It doesn't matter how beautiful it is. I mean, we stayed in an incredible place. A picture-perfect, hand-built Japanese house on acreage and all that somebody would actually travel to. And, you know, and we get them and go, well, let's go see something else. You know, because it's right here. And, yeah, okay. And it's just funny to watch the mind, you know. Grasping onto that thing is it's gonna be okay if this happens, and or it's gonna be terrible if that happens. And they all happen. And so the point is, if we can recognize that there is no one thing, there is no one event, there is no one. This is an ongoing and good quote here. When we think, what we think of as I is a succession of instants in a continuum of consciousness. That's the deal, right? So all of this is just a constant flow. You know, my John is nothing but experiences that just keep flowing like a river. And but I want to just freeze it and make it something, and see it as real and self-existent, and that creates the problem because. If I recognize that I am but a river of consciousness, well, who's getting angry? And why would I get angry? Because now I'm in a new moment. And if I want better moments, they're going to come from what I water now and how I respond to this moment. But when I get worked up over how something should be, I'm not only destroying this moment, I'm planting more seeds of anger and reinforcing as though things exist inherently. That just propagates more anger in the future. I literally water the seeds of anger. And then if I can tell, like the lady with her kids, about how wrong that was, somebody's trying to steal your your parking spot. Well, then I get indignant, and then you tell me, that's right, they shouldn't have done that. So the next time someone's trying to get my parking spot. Or you get to a restaurant. That's another thing I watch. You get to a restaurant. What about that table? Oh, we better get to that table because somebody else will get that table. Want the table with the view. Screw those other people. Because they want the table with the view. And can we even remember the views of all the tables that we had a table with a view in our life? No. But boy, sure at that moment, got there before those other people. It just creates tension, suffering. It's fascinating, this thing. The level of realization when emptiness is experienced directly is translated from Tibetan as complete joy. Yeah, complete joy. There's a complete letting go of all psychological, intellectual, and spiritual security. An experience that, when it is properly prepared for, brings with it a great freedom of mind. Some people call it sort of bliss, genuine happiness. Non-conceptual, nothing to grab onto. That our nature, it's already there. This is such a powerful realization that it can even break the chains of samsara. As Geshe Gelsen writes, the wisdom of emptiness can sever the very root of cyclic existence. To develop a profound and lasting understanding of emptiness is not an easy task, and normally requires a practitioner to engage in advanced meditation practices. The Indian master Dharmakirti tells us the view of emptiness liberates, and the remaining meditations are meant to achieve. Okay, so we'll break that down a minute. We must be wary, however, because of our psychological habit of solidifying things, not to regard emptiness as being itself somehow ultimately existent. As emptiness is the quality shared by all phenomena, it is also the nature of that quality. Hence, the texts speak of the emptiness of emptiness. The subject of emptiness appears complicated because we are so used to our present mode of conception. However, it is said that even to develop a slight doubt that the way things appear to us is the way that they actually are is beneficial. Okay, so he's saying that there's in the path, because we're going through a path. As we develop first an intellectual understanding of emptiness, and we work with that, we start applying the meditations to it. We can get a direct realization, but that opening provides an opportunity to do the complete achieving. So it's not enough. It's not enough to have a taste. It's helpful to have a taste. My teacher once told me it could also be detrimental to have a taste. It's interesting. If it comes too easy, sometimes it won't work. You get that taste of non-dual nature of reality. So people that go to retreats and you meditate, and you can meditate and you just lose sense consciousness, and you get just a sort of taste of this non-dual nature of reality. And you recognize, wow, I'm not my body. I'm much more than this. There is no I, really. There's nothing there. Kind of freaky, actually. A lot of people get scared, so they're not prepared for it. So it's proper preparation and meditating. You get a taste of this non-dual nature, this luminous, blissful nature of mind itself. And that's good, it's beneficial, but it's not the end. In order to be truly liberated, and that's what he pointed up here, the remaining meditations are the means to achieve it. Once you can get that taste, well, then you really need to have the level of mind that shamatha has, where I can bring that laser-like clarity of concentration to do those other meditations of Vipassana to really break that down. But it's doable, and it's not easy, right? If it was easy, then we'd walk out of there. We all be good now. And it's antithetical to how we perceive the world. So that's kind of the challenge. Because we can talk, that's why I think talking about it, we need to talk about it. But it's much better to do it. It's much better to notice me getting angry and realizing I'm delusional. I mean, the sooner we can do that, really, I'm so worked up over, being in a plane, coming home from a vacation and whatever, I mean, when we can step out of it, we can talk about it, we get it. But when we're in it, and our attention is there, and our feelings are there, and our fears are there, and the desires there, and it's just so wrong, and how can they think like that? We're embodied, we're trapped, we're quite caught up in our sense of self. It's visceral. It's really hard to break. And so where we need to start is we need to crack the door. You just need to crack the door. If we can crack the door, we can realize, you know what? I've been angry 1,000,000 times. And then I was happy. I've been happy and blissful a million times, and then I've been angry. I'm none of those things, and they come and go. Crack that door and start to realize that the point of my anger is not the real cause of my anger. And that if this thing I really want to have happen, happens, it's never going to provide me any lasting happiness. This is all conditioned existence. There's nothing there. And all of this is a resource for me to recognize this rare and precious opportunity to be liberated, to see the nature of self and the nature of phenomenon, especially the anger. It points to the delusional thinking. It's actually Tenzin Palmo, Tatsuma Tenzin Palmo. She points out the insidious nature of our pleasures, of the good things, because they contain the seeds of our really grasping. But we're not motivated to get rid of those. We are motivated to get rid of our anger because it doesn't feel good. So the anger is much easier to work with. And I love her quote. She says, people come to me all the time. They ask me how to get rid of their anger, but nobody ever asked me how to get rid of their greed, which is the source of their anger. Right? My desire that things be a particular way. So when we can recognize that these mental afflictions are actually kind of a signpost of seeing how I'm labeling, and how I label it as something self-existent, how I reify things creates all this stress and turmoil. There's a huge opportunity to start noticing how things play out and the bigger picture, and then start making healthy choices towards liberation, towards no more suffering. But first we need to create even the slight doubt, the slight doubt. And that I think is really helpful, right? So we've had a number of things that I think are helpful. I think just the number one tool that I like to give out, and we did that for a week, was just whenever we had a resistance or an anger or frustration or a fear or insecurity, was to change my attitude about it. Try to adopt a different perspective, right? And see how that shifts everything, right? One of the things that one of the mindfulness exercises we have comes from I can't name the person it's his quote, it's his advice, and I can't pull up his name, but he said, how would it be if you treated everyone you met as though it was their last day? As if you knew it was their last day. Right? Now imagine treating everyone you meet as if you knew it was their last day on earth. How would you treat them differently? How would we see them differently? How would that... And you'll notice that will totally shift how we treat people by changing my perspective a bit. Or just recognizing that everybody's, trying to find happiness just like me. Maybe I would be much more skillful at dealing with their unhealthy behavior, recognizing it's something they do, it's not who they are. I'm doing that by tweaking with my attitude. So, in order for us to see as we want to crack that door, we have to start thinking, whenever we say that is the cause of my suffering, to know that that's not accurate, is it? There's no one thing, right? There's no one thing. Any questions? Just got a little bit more. So wisdom in Tibetan Buddhism has a number of different meanings, but the most profound kind of wisdom is the wisdom that realizes the truth of emptiness. Wisdom, or prajna, is usually presented by female deities with the bell. Okay, that's a side point. But here's what they do is they bring in my teacher, Geshe Gelsen, he's just hammered this 3 levels of wisdom. And so I've covered them, and it's always good to know. So there's the wisdom of hearing the teaching, hearing the Dharma, right? That's what we're getting. And it's valuable, right? And we're talking about it. And it's really important to remember that that's valuable, because when we're out there with other people doing other things, we're probably not talking about this, right? So when I'm eating food, I'm not saying I'm having a delicious experience as a result of this food that I'm labeling ice cream enters my mouth, right? Merely labeled John is having a experience that I'm labeling delicious because of this phenomenon I call ice cream is touching my body, right? I mean, that's more accurately what's happening, but we don't talk like that. We go, this ice cream is delicious, which is absolutely not true. So our whole conventional world out there is based in delusion. And we speak that way. It's conventionally appropriate to speak that way. I mean, it would be weird, right? Hey, how's your ice cream? Well, it's just ice cream. But I'm having a delicious experience with it. Yeah, I mean, right? Yeah, we're not going to have too many cool friends. So, but we need to somehow maintain what we call these true truths, conventional reality, but knowing the ultimate reality. The ultimate reality is what makes the ice cream delicious is how I've lived my life. It's not the ice cream alone. It's the conditions that give rise to ice cream and the karmic imprints that allowed for a pleasurable experience. And the fact that I'm not sick to my stomach today, right? Or whatever. That it's not the ice cream itself, right? It's this myriad web. And the actual cause for me to have a pleasurable experience can only be one ultimate cause. Primarily, and that's how I've lived my life. I've either created karmic imprints that will give rise to pleasurable experiences when that myriad causes of conditions arise, or not. So if I don't want angry people or mean people or these people in my life, the last thing I should do is get angry at them. I just keep planting more sins, perpetuating them. I can set boundaries. I can, address their behaviors out of compassion, understanding they're acting out of their own suffering, but it's inappropriate and we need to nix this. But without thinking they're inherently bad and the problem. Does that make sense? Because that's kind of the problem, is I want to be happy, but I do everything to encourage suffering. Right? And then when I put somebody in their place, then I brag about it. I make it worse. Thinking that that's the thing. But what I do is I keep reinforcing my ego, and I keep reinforcing seeds of anger, and I justify anger, and then I keep it alive, rather than addressing that the anger is based on a label and a way of looking at something, and not accepting things as they actually are, when I can more skillfully just address things as they are. Being angry about it's not going to make it better. Doing something about it will. Right? So the first level of wisdom is that we actually talk about it. Because if we don't have these, that's why we need sangha, that's why we need Dharma teachings. At least here we're talking about it. Out there we're not very much. So we need that wisdom. But then we need to go to the second wisdom, which is, I call it contemplating the teaching. So here, wisdom one attains from thinking. So contemplating, breaking it down. So that's where we kind of attack it. We think about it. Does that make sense? Does this hold up? If it doesn't hold up, it's no good. I mean, we need to tear it apart and go, is this true? Does it make sense? Does that work? Let me test it. I got to think about it. I've got to apply it. It has to be at the monastery, we have debate, and we'll debate the heck out of things, and tear it apart. What about this? And does that work? He said that. Is that person really the source of your problems or not? You know, does that hold up? Does anger last? Does happiness last? Tear it apart. We get it, and we need to think about it. It needs to make sense. It needs to stand scrutiny. And if it can withstand scrutiny, if we take time to debate it, think about it, tear it apart, you're going to have a different kind of wisdom there, because you'll know it's true on a different level, because it's held up to every possible attack. And that's what we want. I mean, Buddhism wants to know the truth. It doesn't want to propagate an idea, a dogmatic way of thinking. It wants to know what's true. That's what liberates. So now that I've heard a teaching, now I've thought about the teaching, I've gone through in Lam Rim, we have these nice analytical meditations to kind of think about that. Maybe discuss it with somebody. Then the third wisdom is the wisdom that from meditation. The only way to really, cultivate it as a direct realization is to then meditate on that knowledge, that understanding. And there's very specific techniques for meditations on emptiness to cut right through. And so usually what happens is we kind of get stuck at just the first wisdom. Right? We hear about it, it's kind of cool. We talk about something, we read a book. Yeah, I get it. And then I read, what's that other Dharma book? You have another Dharma. I did the Lam Rim, and we move on to the next thing without ever really letting that absorb. And if we really want to make progress, if we want this to have some stickiness, often it's like water on a rock. We get it, but as soon as somebody pisses me off outside, they're a jerk. And I'm going to tell them what's up. And then I'll come here and I'll go, wow, that was so ridiculous. And I got mad at that guy because he was just doing that. And then I go outside and then somebody does that. And I go, what a jerk. And then I do it again. So if I spend, we say 16 hours awake. And if I spend an hour a week at a Dharma talk, and I spend the rest of my time all my delusional thinking, how am I ever going to change? It's going to be challenging, isn't it? But if I take that Dharma talk and I take my readings and I have a daily practice where I keep watering, oh yeah, reality. Here's a day that will never come again. I have a rare and precious human rebirth, and things are constantly changing and they're interdependent. And today I'm going to engage in this day, understanding that things change and these are labels, and I'm going to work with my attitude to try to see things in a bigger picture. Well, now I've got something to change, because now I'm taking direct application. I'm actually engaging in the second wisdom by doing it. And I really think that's the valuable piece, because when we notice a sense of anger arise and we don't act on it, and we notice it come and go, that is invaluable. When I notice I wanted to, say something harshly, and I took a breath and I said something differently, that's where we're making progress. When I start to notice that I'm getting agitated, and I notice that, it will come and go, and that's okay. Let's just not say anything right now. And in a few minutes, suddenly I can speak to this other human being in a very clear way. That's when we're making progress. Then we start to notice the interdependence of things, but we also notice the impermanent nature of thoughts and feelings. And we start noticing that the things I get so attached to come and go, and the things that go wrong come and go. But what sticks is the seeds that I'm planting and how I'm living. We're making progress. That's the second. But ultimately then, we want to take it to a really good meditation practice. And that's where I think for a good starting point, I mean, we do our morning practice where we get concentrated, we set an intention and a motivation, and we start our day, and we try to be mindful during the day, engaging in healthy activities and watching those tendencies, nurturing the ones that are beneficial. But at the end of the night, a nice purification practice, a nice purification practice where I can look at what did I do that I didn't feel good about. And let's purify that. How can I learn? What was the pride or ego or fear thing that went on there? And those that did Vajrasattva, it's a nice practice. We have, the transforming unskillful events meditation you can do. It takes about 10 minutes. Look at it. What is it that arose? What do I need to learn from? And how can I respond differently? That's an invaluable meditation because now we're meditating. We're bringing a concentrated presence of mind into my afflicted behaviors and poking at it and saying, what was going on there? And more importantly, how can I do it differently next time? I can start planting new seeds. So that's really valuable. So the Four Opponent Powers meditation or the Transforming Unskillful Events meditation or a Vajrasattva practice, incorporating those I think are very, very beneficial. And next time I teach, theoretically, because things change, we'll go through the meditation on emptiness, on selflessness, right? So the typical method of addressing the 5 aggregates that make us what I think John is. It's fun. And so there's a method to kind of start realizing I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not that, and then where's John? It's a lot harder than where's Waldo. It's a lot harder to find John. So
we'll do that meditation as a group next week.
Well, I'm not going to be here next week. I'm sorry, I have to travel a little bit. But the next time I teach, see how I worded that. The next time I'm here teaching, yeah. But yeah. So even when I'm gone, sometimes I can teach and we can broadcast it. So I'm trying to, so yeah. So I apologize, I have to travel a little bit. I know, I just got back today. It was an incredibly difficult 13-hour journey on a plane. Oh, that's right. It was a wonderful trip where we got an overnight from all the way over there to all the way over here. And you know what? We had good flight karma. We really did, yeah. Every flight was early. The lady who was upset next to Laura left, so Laura had an extra seat. And that lady got a nice seat. She actually had a whole row to herself. I mean, it all worked out. Again, it's not like she's good or bad. It's just, it's understanding the nature of mind. So I want to clarify, when I say that. But yeah, everything went out just incredibly smoothly. And yeah, anyway, doesn't always go that way. And yeah, doesn't always go that way. And had it not gone that way, anyway, I'm getting caught up in a thing there. So the point being is we just got in about 1 o'clock today. So it's so good that we got here on Wednesday, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you and grateful to be here. So, all right, so we'll do our dedication. We'll dedicate the merit and virtue that we've accumulated for the benefit of all beings. Let us dedicate the merit and the wisdom that we have accumulated both here today and throughout our lifetimes, both individually and collectively. We dedicate this for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free of suffering, find lasting happiness. May we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes to purify our own minds, to cultivate the clarity of mind and the potentials of recognizing the nature of reality as it is, so we can become truly enlightened for the benefit of all beings. All right, thank you all so much. Joy to be here. And you online, thanks so much for joining us. And on Saturday, we'll have Chenrei Sig practice and our book study. And in the Chenrei Sig practice, if you haven't done the 4 opponent powers, we do it within the Chenrei Sig practice. So, and for you online, we broadcast it as well. So you can join us from afar. There's probably other announcements, but I'm jet lagged. So anyway, be well and try to stay out of trouble. Okay.